Hi, everyone. I just wanted to take a minute to quickly go back over the tissues that we talked about this week. So I'm just going to quickly go through the slides and just give you some reminders of how I recognize these tissues and I'm able to tell them apart from each other. So again, with our epithelial tissues, that's our first group that we went through. Anytime you see that word simple, that just means one layer of cells. Squamous means squashed cells. So again, what you're looking at here is one layer of squashed cells around these air sacs in the lungs. And so when you see this type of tissue, if it's one layer, flat cells, you know that's simple squamous. Our second type of epithelial tissue is our simple cuboidal. So again, simple meaning one layer, cuboidal meaning now, if you follow my cursor, these cells are much more sort of cube shaped or like little squares, and they're going around that layer. So even though there's a lot going on this slide, it's really just this layer of cells right around each of these little holes or these little tubules that we are focusing on. Continuing with our simple epithelia, we do also have a simple columnar. So now simple columnar are these much taller rectangular shaped cells. Again, just one layer of them along this surface. This is the type of tissue you'd find in your intestines. And then the other thing about simple columnar is that they have these goblet cells. So again, looking at my cursor, these little pockets here of fluid, each of those is a goblet cell with mucus that it's going to secrete. Our second column-shaped epithelial tissue is our pseudostratified ciliated columnar. Pseudostratified means it looks like there's multiple layers of nuclei here, multiple layers of cells, but it's really just one layer here. So because it looks stratified, but it's not, that's why they call it pseudostratified. Ciliated because of these tiny little cilia along the surface. So you can see those tiny little hair-like projections. We have these in our airways to sort of sweep those particles out that we breathe in. With this type of epithelial tissue, we also have goblet cells. So these big pockets here of mucus are those goblet cells again. Not all of our epithelial tissues are simple. Some of them do have multiple layers. Transitional epithelial is only found in our urinary bladder, and it doesn't really fit our squamous, cuboidal, or column-shaped cells. It kind of has an array of all of them, and they're kind of arranged in different ways. And we also have these apical cells that are kind of laying on their side. And the reason for this distribution is because when the bladder fills with urine, these cells need to be able to be compact or pressed to sort of stretch that bladder. And then once you urinate, those cells go back into place and expand back out. So transitional epithelial is called that because it can go from one state, meaning it's very compact when that bladder is full versus not as compact when it is empty. Continuing with our stratified epithelial, we have one stratified that we'll talk about. It's called stratified squamous. Stratified means we're now looking at many layers, and squamous still means flat. There are two different types, and so this specific one here is keratinized. Keratin is that material that's found in the epidermis of our skin, so that's what we're looking at here. And this whole top layer of cells where you don't see any of those nuclei, you don't see any of those dark purple nuclei anymore, those are keratinized. So basically what happens is those skin cells are dead, they're packed with keratin, and that's what flakes off of us all day, every day. So when you see no nuclei near that surface, you know that is keratinized, just like our skin. On the other hand, there are other areas where we would need many layers of flat cells, like on the insides of our mouth. And so because those still have a mucous membrane intact, those cells are all alive. We still have these little spindle-shaped cells and many layers of them, so still stratified squamous. But because these nuclei go all the way to the surface here, it is not keratinized, so these cells are still alive. Moving on to our connective tissues. With connective tissues, the first few are considered loose. That's because they have a lot of space in there. This one is adipose. So basically what you're looking at is each of these little circles is a fat droplet inside of that adipose site. And so this is a connective tissue specifically named adipose, and these cells are adipose sites. So site just means a mature cell, in this case, a mature adipose cell. Our second connective tissue is areolar connective tissue. It's still quite loose, so what you're looking at here is a lot of ground substance. Remember, connective tissues have a lot of that fluid mixture in the background. But these dark pink fibers, protein fibers, are collagen, and then we have some of these darker purple or black looking fibers. Those are some elastic fibers. And then we have these tiny little nuclei, these little cells, and the cells here are called fibroblasts. And a blast means that it's going to build material. So in this case, fibroblast would build all of these protein fibers. Our next connective tissue is blood, so it falls into that connective category. The specific name is blood, and you'll need to be able to distinguish between the red and white blood cells. So erythrocytes, the red blood cells, are all of these little red-shaped discs. They do not have a nucleus. And then anytime you see one with the dark purple nucleus staining, those are white blood cells or leukocytes. Lymphocytes is just a type of leukocyte. So if you call them white blood cells, if you call them leukocytes, either one of those works for me. Up next, we've got our three different types of cartilage. And so with cartilage, they all have chondrocytes. So the prefix chondro means cartilage, cyte again meaning mature cell. And for me, all chondrocytes kind of look like the shape of a capital letter D. And so if you kind of look at here, they're not all perfectly shaped like capital letter Ds, but a lot of them are. So if you can start to notice that trend, it will help you recognize this as cartilage. This specific cartilage is hyaline cartilage. It is got all of these pink collagen fibers in it, but a lot of space as well for water in the background so that it can withstand compaction at those joint surfaces. Now, with cartilage, the second type is called elastic cartilage. So just like when we looked at that areolar connective tissue, those darker, stringy looking things in the background are elastic fibers. So in this picture here, they're very, very dark, almost black. Here you can see those little black stringy things all behind these cells. Again, the cells are still our D-shaped cells. They're still chondrocytes because they belong to cartilage. But in this case, it is elastic cartilage. So we find this in our ear, the pinna of the ear. The last type of cartilage is fibrocartilage. And so fibrocartilage still has our tiny little D-shaped chondrocytes, but now it's inundated with many, many, many fibers. And that's why it's called fibrocartilage. We find fibrocartilage in those intervertebral discs between each of our vertebrae. And again, they have to withstand quite a bit of compaction as well with the weight of our body, our upper body. Moving on to one of my favorite connective tissues, this is osseous or bone tissue. This is specifically compact bone. And so these kind of look like tree rings to me. If you cut down a tree, you kind of see the rings inside that tree. That's what this always reminds me of. This is our central canal here, and each of these circles or tree rings is an osteon. And so that's the functional unit of compact bone. And so basically, each of these little tiny little dark areas here is a little osteocyte sitting in its little cavity or lacuna, and those are live cells. And so when we think about bone, we often just think about the hard calcium part of it, but we have live cells in bone as well, and those are osteocytes. Moving into our dense connective tissues, we do have three different dense tissues that we look at. This first one is called dense regular because there's not much space here, pretty tightly packed fibers, and they are all in a nice uniform layout. So each of these fibers is layered in a very specific way. Obviously, there is order and structure to how these fibers were laid down. If it is this lighter colored pink, it is collagen fibers that we're looking at again. Sorry for this typo here with cartilaginous, but it should be collagenous, so made out of collagen. versus our dense regular. So regular because we've still got all the fibers going in the same direction. But here we've got the dark purple fibers again. So anytime you see that dark purple or black fibers, it is now elastin. So still falls under connective tissue. Specific name would be dense regular, and then these fiber types are elastin. And then our last connective tissue is dense irregular. And so the biggest difference here is these collagen fibers are not laid down in specific, nice little neat rows, right? They're laid all sort of directions. There's a little more space between them, but not much, which is why it's still a dense tissue. But because of that irregular layering of those collagen fibers, it is considered dense, irregular connective. The next three tissues are our muscle tissues. With skeletal muscle, the biggest giveaway here is these striations across the muscle cells. So our muscle cells are like big cylinders here, and then these stripes or striations going across is a key indicator for skeletal muscle. We'll talk about what those striations do in our muscle physiology chapter, but for now, just know that the striations are stripes, and you also see many nuclei along each of these cells. This kind of reminds me of a piece of salmon that you might see at the grocery store. It looks like a fillet of fish. With cardiac muscle, we still have these sort of cylindrical shaped cells, but there is some branching now in these cells. So we see them branching. And because of that branching pattern, we have these darker colored areas here, which are called intercalated discs. So each of these darker areas, even on this slide over here, um, those are, again, intercalated discs to hold these cardiac muscle cells together because the heart's constantly contracting and pumping to move blood. These protein structures help hold those cells intact. So cardiac muscle still has the striations or stripes going across it, but now we see branching and we also see these intercalated discs. And then our last type of muscle is smooth muscle. So we're back to kind of those spindle-shaped cells that we saw in the squamous epithelial, but we're not at a surface anymore. So we know that this cannot be an epithelial tissue. There's also no striations going across this muscle perpendicularly, and so because of that, it's considered smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is what we would find in all of those soft organs as well as our blood vessels. Last but not least, we've got our one nervous tissue. Nervous tissues have two different cell types that you'll need to be able to identify. This is a neuron, so the big cells are neurons. This is the cell body with all those axons and dendrites coming off of it. Those are the cells in our nervous system that do all the communicating. And then the tiny little dots in the background, all these little dots behind it are neuroglial cells, or sometimes just called glial cells. There's five different types of them. We'll talk all about them in the nervous system, but for now, just know that these big guys are our neurons, and the little ones in the background are neuroglial cells. And again, the major category of tissue here is nervous, and this is the only nervous tissue that you need to know. So hopefully some of these tricks will help you guys out as you are studying the material. If you ever need any help, please let me know, and I will be happy to do so.